it's me, Jacob, the guy who likes to talk about Game of Thrones. Let's talk about Game of Thrones. I was looking at some reviews online that said that they thought the first few episodes have been mostly filler and that nothing important happened, but I strongly disagree with that. I think they've been setting up a very important conflict here, one that will be as essential to this series as the Starks against the Lannisters, and maybe even the living against the dead. Why do I say that? Well, it's all about character. Todd Alcott argues that one of the most important questions when you're writing a story is, what does the protagonist want? This is a complicated question when you're dealing with a story that has as large of a cast as Game of Thrones. But what I find fascinating about this is the simple fact that ultimately this entire series is about people who, more often than not, get what they want. Sound crazy? Allow me to illustrate. Ned Stark wanted to be an honorable man. Daenerys wanted to go home. Tyrion wanted to be appreciated for his intellect and to be seen by his father as more than a whoremongering fool. Arya wanted to be a warrior. Jon wanted to be more than just a bastard. And you know what? They all got what they wanted. But Game of Thrones is a monkey's paw world, where your desires come at a terrible cost. Now, this can get a little bit complicated. For example, Catelyn Stark is a lady, which I mean in both the classical and the colloquial sense. So a lot of what she wants is actually what her husband wants and later her son. So she doesn't really fall as neatly into the model that I've established here. This is also further complicated by the differences between the book and the show. In the beginning of the book, she encourages Ned to go south, while she is much more reluctant about the idea in the show. And as for how the story ends with her, well, I'd rather save the book versus show discussion for another time. The point is, it's useful to think about what characters want, and that is why we need to talk about Sansa. I've grown quite fond of Sansa over the years, although, like a lot of people, I've been frustrated with the poor treatment that she's received on the show. Like her mother, Sansa's options have been severely limited by her gender, but beyond that, she's also spent most of the show essentially as a hostage. First the Lannisters, then Littlefinger, and finally Ramsay. Only now that Winterfell has been reclaimed has she finally found the freedom to make decisions for herself. So, what does Sansa want? In the beginning, Sansa wanted to be a queen. In Season 1, in fact, she says,
"You left your home to come here, and I'd be queen someday. Please make Father say yes.
Sansa.
Please, please. It's the only thing I ever wanted."
And hey, she got close. Good for her. But her desires have changed with experience and maturity. Sansa's more childish ideas of queendom have been replaced with a deeper understanding of power. It can allow you to protect the people you love, to hurt those who have wronged you, and, crucially, it must be fought for and protected. Sansa has learned how to play the game, even if the show doesn't necessarily find the best ways of portraying that, and this terrifies me. Why? Well, remember her wardrobe change at the end of Season 4?
Damn, girl, damn, girl, damn, girl, damn, girl, damn, girl, damn.
This was not only a symbol of her growing maturity, but also a very clear connection to Cersei Lannister, an association that the show has made on multiple occasions, and which others have observed as well. There are some people who have referred to this as her becoming Dark Sansa. I have seen complaints that this aspect of the character has been abandoned, but I'm not so sure. Consider what happened in Season 7, perhaps while pretending it was executed a bit better than it was. Not only did Sansa give counsel to Jon and oversee the preparations for winter, but she also successfully outmaneuvered Littlefinger and brought the Lords of the North and the Vale to her side. She also came very close to having her little sister killed. Sansa has become very shrewd, but she has also become very relentless. Unlike Jon, she was in the company of allies who became enemies, and her faith in others was almost always betrayed. She's never even been in love with someone who loved her back. This is why I viewed her encounters with Daenerys with considerable trepidation. Is the Dragon Queen's appeal to love a sign of her stupidity, or her treachery? Sansa seems to struggle to find a third option. Some people seem to think that once the others made it south of the wall that we had seen the end of politicking and subterfuge, but the title of the story is Game of Thrones. It would be strange if they just abandoned all that now, and despite the epic battles to come, I think political intrigue is still the heart of the show. Let's consider the current situation in the north from Sansa's perspective. Her brother, Jon, has bent the knee to a Targaryen, a family responsible for the killing of her grandfather and uncle, with a history of cruelty and paranoia. Daenerys has brought 2 foreign armies and 3 of the most powerful military weapons in the known world to Winterfell, and not only that, she has managed to lose one of the weapons to the enemy through her recklessness and poor judgment. Who has Sansa become? What has Sansa learned over the years? It's important to remember that she was not only a hostage of Cersei, she was also a student. And the clip should go right about here.
They've never ranged this far north.
You're the military man, but I know her. If you're her enemy, she'll never stop until she's destroyed you. Everyone who's ever crossed her, she's found a way to murder.
You almost sound as if you admire her.
I learned a great deal from her.
Sansa wants to protect her family, and she wants, understandably, to maintain the power she has obtained over the years. Daenerys is a threat to all of this. What would Littlefinger do in this situation? What would a cold, calculating master of the Game of Thrones do when a Targaryen queen arrives at their doorstep? What would Cersei do? Play the game. Do you trust this stranger, who is arrogant and presumptuous, but clearly not without some measure of guile? Do you have faith that Daenerys won't kill everyone if the North pushes for some measure of independence? Or do you look for the first opportunity to remove this threat, this blade pressed against the throat of the North? And yeah, perhaps now isn't the best time to strike. Before you take action, what you need is a weapon. That's why I started panicking as soon as Sam went straight to Jon to discuss his birthright in episode 1. Oh no. No.
Son.
In a recent interview, Preston Jacobs said that he didn't see the point of the revelation. This is like a couple arguing about who owns the bed they both sleep in. As long as you're a couple, it doesn't matter one way or the other. Of course, you could have said something similar early on in Season 1. Relationships change. Romances end. A lot of people have scoffed at Jon immediately telling Dany the truth about his mother and father, but Jon has always tried to be an honest man because of what he wants. While he's always dreamed of being more than a bastard, he's always wanted to be a Stark, to honor the man he thought was his father, even if he could never even take the name. He couldn't even lie to Cersei. Would Jon be willing to fight Dany for the throne? I find that somewhat unlikely. Jon has always had a distaste for power, and if it came to it, I think he'd genuinely prefer to keep silent in favor of Dany, if given the opportunity. But imagine what Sansa might learn in one conversation with Sam. First, her worst fears would be confirmed. The Dragon Queen is not only burning men alive, but ending entire bloodlines. And most critically, she would learn that if Daenerys dies, the position of the Starks would be immeasurably improved, and Westeros would finally have a good, honorable man as king as a result. Jon may not be willing to play the game, but Sansa is. And if something were to happen to the Queen, well, distaste or no, Jon has always done his duty when he has no other choice. It has always seemed as though the end of Dany's story was the choice between 2 alternatives. Will she succeed or fail in taking the Iron Throne? Will she be a good queen, or will she succumb to her father's madness? But a third option is becoming clear now, and it is in keeping with what the show has always been. All too often, the greatest threat is not being broken on the battlefield, but being outmaneuvered in the courts of the kings and queens. I believe that Dany is in tremendous danger, and that the final central conflict of the show may be the most painful. Not Stark versus Lannister, not living versus dead, but Stark versus Targaryen. And I think Sansa may play a pivotal part in that final conflict. Which way will Sansa go, I wonder? Will she follow Jon and the example of her father despite the risk? Or will she decide to do what she believes is necessary and destroy those who dare stand against her? Is it possible she can find some synthesis between Lannister cunning and Stark honor? I look forward to finding out. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'm glad. It's good to like things. Anyway, I'll see you next time. Bye.